So how do I take a 14-foot skiff out 15 miles offshore? Hey everybody, welcome to Out to Sea. My name is Tom, where we are typically taking a 14-foot Livingston anywhere between 8 and 15 miles offshore in search of bluefin tuna, mahi, thresher sharks, and pretty much anything else that's biting out there. For those of you who are new to the channel, thank you so much for joining. For those of you who are been following along, this is episode 9 of our 11 series episode where we are doing a walkthrough of that boat to see things I've done to it, things I've done for it, to allow me to safely take it out in search of bluefin tuna, sharks, mahi. So episode 9 being how do we move the darn thing, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be going through each of the engines, which right here we have the Suzuki, which is the main engine. We have our Tohatsu here, which is the auxiliary. And then there's a few other things that we're going to dive into, things that I could use, but depending on kind of the situation, whether I do or don't. So I'm going to talk through basically what pros and cons of each one. And so I guess let's begin. So we are going to start with the Suzuki. So for those of you who've been following me on Instagram, know that I use a 20 horsepower tiller with my 14-foot skiff. And it being a tiller, it's always interesting getting out many miles offshore, seeing some other boats, and you get a bunch of mixed results on their reaction. But it is indeed a tiller, so I'm not sitting at a helm. I am grabbing a tiller usually on my hip, so it usually looks a little funky going out there. But main engine being the Suzuki, 20 horsepower. This is a DF20 long shaft. I mean, this thing's been a champ. This thing's been fantastic. I really have no bad things to say about it. I mean, the only thing that I would say is that it's just a little underpowered. I tend to take out a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of gear on the boat. A lot of it being safety reasons. A lot of it because you never know what you're going to encounter out there. Which includes things like harpoon or extra parts for the engines, or I mean, another human being, which you can only fit one extra human being on the boat because it's so small. But there's usually everything it's absolutely loaded from bow to stern, which really doesn't give you a lot of room. But anyhow, it does add a lot of weight. So the only con I have with the motor, it's not with the motor, it's just the power. And it's just, when deciding on the Suzuki, it was more kind of the weight to power ratio that I felt that this was kind of the happy medium. It would just get me by and allow me to do the things that I've been so fortunate enough to do. But you just have to be careful with how much you're loading the boat up with, because it doesn't take much to knock the boat off of plane, depending on swell direction and things like that. So you have to be really in tune with just how the swells are developing, where they're going as you're maneuvering and navigating. But what I can say, there's a lot of pros with this engine. Given that it's such a small boat, it's a small engine, the fuel economy on this thing is unreal. On a flat day, I get about 10 miles to the gallon, which I take 9 gallons out. I have a 6-gallon tank and a 3-gallon tank. So, I mean, I could potentially go 90 miles if all is favorable. But the most I think I've ever taken was, well, actually I know how much. The longest I've taken was 66 miles in search of bluefin tuna, where I actually had to go from the 6-gallon tank and swap over to the 3-gallon at the very tail end of the trip. But anyway, back to the motor. The motor has been a champ. I mean, the stuff that it's allowed me to do has been great. Super fuel, it's super efficient. This is a fuel injected. I haven't had, I mean, you treat it right, it will treat you right. I haven't had any issues with it at all, and it's just been a champ. I don't know if there's anything else I'd say. I mean, the maintenance, I'll be doing a maintenance series on both of these motors, which you can look at if it's posted by the time you look at this. But maintenance is relatively easy on this. I mean, if you can change the oil in your car, it's not too different than changing the oil in the motor here. I think the one thing that maybe people might get a little intimidated by is changing the impeller in the lower unit. But I mean, if you're changing oil in the lower unit, that's probably the easiest thing to do for these motors. But yeah, it's been fantastic. Suzuki, 20 horsepower. So other thing I would also mention with this motor, I have electric tilt and I have electric start, so power tilt electric start. if you are looking for motors, I highly recommend adding those in if it fits within your budget. Reason being, it's just, I mean, part of it's safety, right? So you do not have to, if you're getting rocked around, whether you're in an inlet or there's heavy boat traffic around, you don't have to worry about lifting the motor up or down. You can just push a button, and like, let's say you're going through shallow water and you need to pick up the motor ASAP because you didn't really realize that the bottom was coming up. It just makes it so much easier. To me, I think it's safer. And then the electric start is just kind of a nice thing. You don't have to worry about pulling the cord, which, I mean, to pull this cord is pretty effortless, but to just be able to push a button, I mean, if you already, I don't know if they come with power tilt and not the electric start, but again, if you can put it into your budget, I would highly recommend it, regardless of manufacturer, whether it's Suzuki, Yamaha, or Mercury, or any of the others, Honda. So, fantastic motor. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of hooked on Suzuki. So, but if you have other motors that you like, definitely add some comments down there for anything that I go through. If there's things that you have questions about, comments, suggestions, I mean, just add them to the comments. Okay, so jumping over, so this thing's a champ. Nothing but things there. Just a little underpowered for what I do. That's part of the reason I'm doing the boat build, is to increase the power. We're gonna go from a 20 to a 60, so it's gonna have some giddy up. All right, so I've never not had to use this motor, right? I mean, I guess technically that's not the case, but primarily use this one. The auxiliary motor that I have is just strictly backup. God forbid something goes wrong with this one, I'm out 15 miles, I need to make headway. I don't want to rely on somebody else or have to wait there for somebody to come pick me up or somebody to give me a tow. I want to be able to get moving, or maybe I'm in a bad situation where I need to just make some movement. I have my backup auxiliary motor here, which is a Daihatsu 3.5 horse. Manual, everything. So it's pretty simple. This does have a carburetor. One thing I will say with this motor here, I'm not sure if it's changed, but it didn't have a fuel filter, which I found to be extremely odd, and actually caused some problems for me when I first got the motor, that it caused the carburetor to clog up because there might have been debris, part of the manufacturer, whatever the case is, it doesn't matter. It did clog up the carburetor and it stopped working. Given that was under warranty, I mean, it was easy. Gave it to a mechanic who does Daihatsu work, and it was very simple. I mean, it was great, no problem. So that was the only thing. I did put in a fuel filter, which I can show you. Let me just take that off. Just do this real quick, and then we'll get back into talking about more of the stuff here. So if you see right there, and I can't really pull it out, but that right there is the inline fuel filter that I put in. I mean, I'm not sure why it's not standard, but since I did that, I haven't seen an issue. So that's been totally fine. And then obviously you can see that it has an internal tank, where I do have a separate cap. In another video I forget what episode number it was, I did talk about the separate cap I have with the connection that I put on the top, this DIY cap, excuse me, where I can connect actually the top of this to one of my gas tanks, and actually will draw from the gas tank as long as everything is airtight between your connections and stuff. But I can run this engine off of my 6-gallon tank and 3-gallon tank. So I don't have to worry about like it only lasting whatever the capacity of this tank. I can draw, and then, so even though it's going to be a slow go on the way in, at least it will be a go. And I wouldn't have to worry about running out of fuel or trying to take fuel out of that tank, out of my main tanks to dump in here. Obviously, because what if you're in some rough weather, or what if it's raining, or whatever the case is. So that is the reason for that. Safety. Like I said, I've never had to use this other than just doing the break-in period. I do run it every time I come home because it always goes out with me. I would absolutely not be doing what I do unless I had a spare motor. It's just, I mean, there's enough risk taking a 14-foot boat out. So that is that motor. And that 15-mile mark, it's not that I would actually take the boat out further than 15 miles, but it's not the fastest with this motor because I actually didn't talk about speed. So it's underpowered for what I do. It's underpowered for what I do, and then the speed of it is not. I'm not breaking any records with the speed on this. So, empty boat, I probably could hit 20 miles an hour, but that is just me and nothing else. With it fully loaded, with another person, like it's around 15 miles an hour. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, based on conditions. So it takes a while. If I'm going 15 miles out, and you can imagine it's going to take me about an hour. But which is not terrible. Which is not terrible for this. But if I, God forbid, it ever failed or something went wrong with it, I would have to rely on this one. And for this motor, I only get about 4.5 at probably the most with the current setup. So if I had to go 15 miles out and I had to come back in on this motor, we're talking hours to come back in. So it becomes a little bit more, you have to figure out your wind windows, right? Or not your wind windows, but your weather windows. And sometimes it becomes a little bit risky. So my distance that I go out is really dependent on the day as well. Not only just the motor. So if there's weather system coming in, then I'm not going to be hanging out 15 miles offshore, where if I did have to go to this, I would be getting hit with that system, and then it would be just a not so great experience coming in. So, but this one's been totally fine. Like I said, after I put in that fuel filter, starts up every time, and it does get the boat moving. I did have to change, so I didn't have to make any modifications to this one. This one's been fantastic. Even the factory prop worked with my boat. I did get another prop because I was swapping just to test things out. I did test out hydrofoil. So if you find that, if you want me to talk through those, my experience with those two, or anything else I've done, just add a comment, let me know, and I'll see and work on another episode talking about those things. But yeah, so we had propulsion 1, 2. The next thing to mention is kind of going back to the safety portion of it. You always want to make sure that you have a paddle or an oar on the boat, just in case, and I think it's actually mandatory for smaller vessels. So for those of you who have been following, I have an episode on steering the boat. So this is a adapter I made. This is not a new concept. It's actually easy to make. It's cheap. I just made it out of PVC and some pipe clamps, but I talk about it in a different episode. This connects to the tiller handle, right? And what I use for the tiller is a paddleboard paddle. So this is me trying to have dual purpose for items on the boat, and the reason I do that is because it saves room for a very tiny boat. So the more things I can have dual purpose or multi-purpose, the more room I save, and it just makes life a little bit nicer on the boat. So yeah, so this is a paddleboard paddle, so I always take both halves out. So I'll steer with one, and then the other one will sit there, and hopefully I'll never really have to use. So I can just pop it off. I mean, I didn't have it shoved all the way in because I didn't want to deal with pushing the button there. But yeah, so if I ever needed it, I have the paddle, and if I need to paddle over to something, and the only time I've really used it is if I'm inshore. Let's say I need to push off the bottom for whatever reason, because I mean, that boat, I mean, I can get into almost ankle deep water if I have the engine up. But so I can get extremely shallow, and I could use this to pole basically the boat. Or, I mean, I've used it trying to go for sheep's head on a low tide, or I mean, blackfish as well. If you get a slack tide and you need to just paddle over to an area just to kind of move the boat a little bit to kind of to see if to explore some other areas. I have used a paddle. I mean, it's not as easy as paddling a paddleboard or a kayak, but it still paddles, interestingly enough, decently well. But obviously I would never paddle, or like if I'm taking 15 miles out, I am not paddling 15 miles back in. That's not going to happen. It's either I'm going to throw the anchor and wait for somebody, or I'm going to try to use other means, right? And so other means would be, let's say the wind is favorable and blowing towards shore. I always carry a tarp. So, I mean, I guess we can call this maybe propulsion number 4, where if I ever had to set up a tarp to just make headway in to have the wind blow me a bit, I always have a tarp on board, but I mean, that would be a terrible situation. I would, if I'm dealing with it, having to put a tarp up, then I mean, I'm having some major problems. But I mean, it's also good to have a tarp on the boat because it's an open boat. If it starts to pour and I want to keep things dry, obviously you can use a tarp for that. The other and last item I have is not a new concept. There are cargo ships, tankers, that are starting to, I don't know how prevalent it is, but starting to use it. There are boats that get pulled by it, which started from kiteboarding, right? So kiteboard kite or just a kite. There are also vessels, pleasure crafts that also use, instead of a sail, they'll use a kite. So kind of going along with that concept, I figured, hey, why not? I can probably do that for a catamaran, even though it's not like the same as a Hobie cat. It doesn't have or prevent much side drift. For those of you who have sailed, boats, when you're getting hit by the wind, can tend to have side drift, so that's why you have a big long keel or dagger boards or something to just, whether it be lee boards, whatever the case may be, just to stop the boat from going sideways the way the wind's blowing, and then it helps propel you forward. So kite. So I have a training kite. It's just a slingshot V3, and then I created a spool system to deploy the kite. I could talk about this on another video. I haven't, obviously, never tried, well, not that I haven't tried it, I've never had to use it. And I did test it, and it was, I would say, 70% fail, 30% success. There are a few things I would need to tweak and think about, but it's not a realistic solution to get in. But it could, I technically can deploy, but it would have to be, everything would have to go right. And seldomly, if you're in a situation where you have to do this, then things are going very wrong. So it's really not that dependable of a solution. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I missed here. If there's anything that you want to hear more about, or things that I may have missed, definitely add down the comments below. But I will say that pretty much concludes episode 9 of our 11 series episode. If you haven't already, follow me on Instagram. That's where I put most of my latest pictures and updates on, which primarily right now is going to be about the boat build. And for those of you who are new to the channel, I'm taking that 14-foot Livingston and I'm putting that 60 horse on. I'm going to put a flat deck, raise the sides, kind of soup to nuts. It's going to be a totally different animal by the time I'm done, which I'm then going to push it further, go much beyond that 15-mile mark, because I mean, one of the goals I have is I would love to take it into some deep water, get after some big eye and yellowfin on it. So follow along for that. Join me on my Instagram, which is out to sea NY. I'll put there's a link, should be in my YouTube profile, but I will put I'll put a link wherever I can here. So if you haven't subscribed already to my YouTube account, it just would be super helpful. For those of you who subscribe, thank you so much. But any questions that you have, reach out, add them to the comments, whether it be related to this topic or anything else. Any ideas that you may have on future videos, I'll answer as many comments as I possibly can. But those ideas are great. I've already had some folks reach out, talk about things like weather, things that I check before I head out. What are my considerations, which is fantastic. So keep those coming. Thanks for joining again. I know this one's probably a little bit long, but I'll try to make it as on point and quick as possible. Not quick, but make sure I'm covering as much as I can. Because the idea is I want to hopefully help anyone out who's boating. It doesn't matter if you're doing on a 14-foot skiff or your boat's 30, 40 feet long. Any of my experiences that I've had, I mean, I'm a lifelong fisherman. I worked on a fishing boat, an ocean fluke fishing boat for 9 years. I do a ton of spear fishing. I pretty much grew up and live around the water. So anything that I have with my experiences, that tips, tricks that I can help you out with, I would love to. So just comments below. Thank you for joining, and we'll catch you next time. Bye, everybody.